Hey peeps, welcome back to the Growth Lab podcast. I'm your host Matt Harris and I run the Growth Lab, a lead generation consultancy for cleaning businesses. This is the second installment of our three-part tech series where I speak with the founders, CEOs and C-suite execs of some of the biggest cleaning platforms in Europe and the US. In today's episode, I'm very excited to chat with Rune Sovndahl, co-founder and CEO of Fantastic Services. Rune started Fantastic Services with his business partner Anton in 2009 when Anton was running a cleaning business. With 2 laptops, a sofa and a shared mobile phone, Fantastic Services was born. Since then, it's evolved into a one-stop shop for home services, providing everything from cleaning, gardening and pest control to removals, plumbing and handyman services. Fantastic Services has grown into a £40 million a year business with national coverage, serving 50,000 customers every month. We talk about how Fantastic Services started with cleaning before expanding into 55 other home services, why customer service is the key to driving the growth of the business, despite Rune's hesitancy in the beginning, why franchising was the best decision for the growth of Fantastic Services, the importance of building your business into a recognizable brand, focusing on inbound marketing to grow the business, why cleaning businesses that don't adopt technology are at a disadvantage and how Service OS has helped Fantastic Services scale, and the crucial ingredient for growing a £1 million business. For more tips on lead generation and insights on the most successful strategies, tools and tactics to help grow your cleaning business, sign up to the Growth Lab newsletter via the link in the episode description. Ready? Let's dive in. I am here with Rune Sovndahl, co-founder of Fantastic Services. Really excited to have Rune on the show to share his journey in growing Fantastic Services. So Rune, rather than me go through a very long introduction, do you just want to tell the listeners a little bit about yourself and the backstory of Fantastic Services?
Well, Matt, thank you so much for having me on. And it's really nice to hear someone who's working the same as us with regards to growing inside the industry, an industry that's quite often overlooked in what it does. But the short of the story, is started with my business partner had a commercial cleaning company. I were in a consumer marketing role in another company, and everybody's heard the story about that. I couldn't find a good end of tenancy cleaners, and I called. And nobody picked up the phone, right? As I said, like the very simplistic way of a business is number 1, answer the calls or at least give accurate pricing. Number 2, turn up. And number 3, do a good job. It's not rocket science. And I found that the industry was, I wouldn't say lazy, but I think it had gone a little bit stagnant. And I was like, why can't I put a price up? It turned out to be harder than I thought. My initial thought, I was like, we can build that in a couple of weeks, a month, or something. The tech can be built in a couple of weeks, a month, and then we can find out how to put pricing up and availability and everything else. But my business partner was in the corporate world, and then in 2008 or 9, one of the biggest clients was Lehman Brothers, and it collapsed. So suddenly, we see this in recessions. It's like suddenly big companies collapse and you lose a contract. And that's where we said, like, how do we diversify away from that and have a mixture of commercial and of domestic? And that's really the foundation of it. And we started with cleaning, and then it just became 55 services. It started with being called Fantastic Cleaners, then it became Fantastic Services. We added removals, we added handyman, we added every single service there is on the part of it. There's one common thread in it. It was about serving the customer. The customer wanted something. They wanted an end of tenancy clean. The removal guys hadn't turned up. Can we provide a removals van? Yes, we can. So it started like that, and then it turned more into the every single landlord, every single person who has got multiple properties. One is the domestic clients, but also what we have a very strong customer base is in landlords who owns multiple properties. And they really need it on that day. They need to make sure this is cleaned on the day. They also needed the same for Airbnb. Before COVID, it was massive. Now it's a little bit different, but every single thing got specialized. So I'd say we're the most generic name of it, but we're probably the most specialized in 55 services, and each run separately in how they work and how they are.
So really starting with cleaning was from personal experience. And would you say that one of the key drivers, other than the tech aspect of it, was that customer service focus and making sure that the customer gets what they want when they want?
It was always about the same. I mean, and one of the things is like, yes, we pride ourselves in having the best tech and everything else. We also have, the fastest answering non-abandon rate on the call center. So it was always about serving the customers, right? It's like give an accurate price, turn up on time, and then deliver a good job. That was the kind of very core three things it started with. Like that was the competitive advantage, and I think that that's the same for everybody else. And then whether prices are competitive or not, it's like people need the job done on that day, or they can fish for offers and they can get 15 bits. There's enough sites that you put your job requests in, and then they can do it. And it's like at the end of the day, do they actually turn up? Yeah. So for us, it was more about how do we get them to supply.
And as you've grown, I know just before we went on, I mentioned the fantastic promises that you have to clients. How have you been able to maintain those promises as the business has grown?
Well, it's
quite rapidly.
It's been okay in the demand section and in the promises section. I mean, one of the things and the very strong dedication on going towards franchising was that there's a bit of ownership in it, which means you keep the clients, which means that you stay with that. Because I always see it a little bit like the marketplace where you can submit 3 offers, but you have no. I mean, do they ever turn up? Do they even reply back to you? Or you get 3 calls and then they're angry with you if you've already made a booking because they called 15 minutes past instead of 3 minutes past or whatever. So it was more like keeping that balanced with supply and demand. And that's what allowed us to continue to grow. And that we did that via franchise.
And when did you make the decision to switch from like the marketplace models to franchising? Because, I listened to some podcast episodes of yours and you were hesitant to franchise initially, right?
I was hesitant to franchising initially. I mean, I think it's fair, especially in the UK. I think that my view was that franchising, a bit like cleaning, had a bad name with it. Right. This is about entrepreneurs. This is about working with others. And it seems like, oh, you just build a brand. You're not really doing much for us. Right. It's like, oh, here's your royalty. And that was, we had the 360-degree principle in Fantastic, which is about us, the staff, the partners or franchisees, the clients and the planet. So it was the full circle around it. Yeah. So we had that in there, and franchising actually really fit well into that. And that was a thing of one of the reasons going down that route, because you have some ownership, you have the best of both worlds. Starting a commercial cleaning company from scratch, and I think you're doing a great job, Matt, in training people in learning about the things, right? So internally, and what I wrote a lot about in my book is that there's a benefit of franchising, where if you're not competing, one is London or Oxford. Competing against whether you got Oxford and Manchester. They learned something in Manchester, and they're teaching the Oxford guys how to improve that. That's something you don't see unless you're a mega corporate, that covers the whole thing. Then, that's how you win your contracts. That's how you win your work. In franchising, you help a lot each other. And I'd say that clean in some ways, and all services, whether it's pest control, it's a little bit of a lonely game. And you're up there and it's like, what are you really providing value? What are you really doing? It's like you're just winning contracts. And that's so we try to build that community. And that's what became Fantastic, and I think we managed to get that right quite early on. It's not been an easy ride because we had COVID, we had Brexit, we had all the other things, but everybody had the same. And I said, in that situation, we were stronger together than we were alone. I think, I feel for every single one of contractual cleaning jobs of either somebody won a ton of contracts, somebody didn't,
Yeah.
And, there was VIP lanes. There's all sorts of fun going on, right?
Yeah, it's true.
I have no idea what, and this stuff here, we were so focused on the domestic side of things. So that's very interesting. And it's like, I think it's been a very lonely game and you're up against this stuff here. But what if you were part of this stuff here? One of the things that I always see, and the reason why I was hesitant with franchising was this thing is, at one stage, you might want to get rid of your company. There's more likelihood of selling a franchise company. You're not building up a brand, you're building up a lot of contracts. There's more likelihood of selling a franchise company because it's running inside a system that one of your peers knows, right? So they know how it's run. So that means that if you decide to move on and do something else, there's more chances of selling that, and that can go in as quick as a day sometimes. Whereas you put a company up for market that has X amount of contracts, it can take a very long time to dispose of. And I think that's kind of part of what the fee is of being in a system. And that was something that we thought a lot about. How do we add value to it? Everything had to add.
So you're saying that being in the system and obviously the community aspect, which is a massive benefit. Like what do you think is the foundational strength of your franchising system? What is kind of the platform off which everything else has grown to help a franchisee take one of the, because I saw on your website you've got 3 different franchise models.
We got 4 or 5. It depends. Okay. We've got some partnerships that are more open towards new services we're launching, so we got more. But the key 3 things is as I said, the foundation for franchise. One is the brand is recognized, right? We've got enough cards street to know, and people see us almost every day. So that's one thing, is the recognition of the brand. That's a huge part of it. It's like, okay, well, you don't have to introduce yourself the same way because, oh, that's fantastic service. They do cleaning, handyman, and gardening, and so forth. So you don't have to introduce yourself, or if you're called, like SJ Cleaners.
Yeah.
Who are you? Like they'll look up your company records and find out are they bidding and so forth. So you have that. That's the brand value. Then on top of that, we have a corporate training team who trains in corporate sales, who trains in growth and business development. We have a team that works dedicated on helping with marketing. We have a team that dedicated helps with call answering and conversion rates and so forth. Then we have the whole system behind us, which is a software system as well that helps us, make 10, 15, up to 25% more per jobs, in the idea that you can do 4 jobs a day instead of 3 by proper scheduling, by proper fleet management, and by mixing some of your partners along with it. So you're getting a hell of a lot for very money compared to what it does. I mean, it's there is the initial investment in all the materials and so forth. It's also for existing companies, and we brought on a couple of existing companies, and we're quite flexible in how we do it. But the main idea is that they have to be on the system, because that allows you to. I mean, like, our software has been 14 years in the making, and there's nothing on the market that has franchise management, as well as fleet management, as well as pricing, as well as indirect billing, invoicing. Everything is in there, from call center management to loyalty to everything else. So it has that part of it, and it has the customer management, the CRM, and everything, and building that, or whether you take something off the block and say, okay, well, that does XYZ. This isn't made for your service, and you'd have to spend money on communicating that, but also you had to spend money on changing that and mixing that in. And I think it's quite a steep hurdle actually to implement the system. Versus this is made for it. It's like it's instant on. Everybody has an app, and check in, check out. There's check-in reports, there's surveys reports, we've done the work, we've done everything else. So it's all there. That's a huge value. But I also think the network. This is what I said about somebody in Oxford has learned something about this way of doing it, with whether they're getting schools, whether they're getting contract with something else. That person in Manchester is on that level now, and say, I want to go to that level. Yeah. That's what I think really adds value.
So the shared insights, right? Because I guess that's what, as an independent, you don't necessarily have, because everyone's cagey about protecting.
And you don't want to share. How did you do that? How did you get the cars for that price? How do you get, which leasing agreement do you get? Where do you buy your equipment and the stuff here? And then suddenly you have buying power because you're larger. So I think that's what's often frowned upon. It's like, oh, I don't want to join a franchise. And that's why I was always reluctant for it, because it's like, okay, how does that work? And then when we looked at all the benefits, that's how it works.
Obviously, the tech play has been a big one for you guys. You mentioned it's taken 14 years to develop, and I'm sure that's consistently ongoing as you innovate more and more, as you learn about different markets and that as well. Compared with independent cleaning businesses in particular, what do you think is their biggest disadvantage in not taking up, tech innovation or incorporating tech within their business?
I think the biggest advantage they have is that if you've got like 5-10 teams, you can still completely look at them and them and so forth. And that's also why, that's not a bad space for a franchise, right? I think that's the biggest advantage. They can look after them, they know them, they know when they're off, they know everything else and so forth. But what I've seen in all the industries that I worked in, right, is that there's like a glass ceiling. It starts at 6 figures, then, a 7-figure business is like, it becomes a completely different beast. And often going from the 7 figures or anywhere else is nearly impossible. So it is about scale to go there with the tech. I also think it's about, you can do X amount of things, but scaling above 5 to 6 teams, it just becomes a completely different company, and it becomes a different operations management. And taking that away in the service operations system, just takes that away from it and allows you to continue with that without having to add staff in the back end. And then if you can then tap into always answering the calls. I mean, I think a lot of guys are still doing the job and answering the calls. Get angry with that if they turn up and they're on the call. They're going like, okay, well, I can do Thursday and this stuff. You're like, hold on, I'm paying you for the hour. You're taking bookings at the same time, or worst, if they're driving. You can't take a call when you're driving and then saying, oh yeah, maybe I can do Thursday, and look at your calendar. That's just not possible. So having a back end office also helps. So I think it's the whole package of that, and a lot of people underestimate that's part of the fee.
And when you developed the tech, was it more the operational side rather than the marketing side that you focused on first? Because I know your background is in marketing, right? Is that's
well, it's twofold. I mean, one is what you see as a consumer or as a person going in is twofold, but also the field management behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Like we managed to, I think we managed to get up to 24% saved miles in software on driving, just to save CO2 efforts. That was a huge increase in the turnover for the franchisees, because you're making money when you're driving. So that allowed them to make a better profit on it. It didn't result in 24% increase in profit, but it didn't result in more profits than you would otherwise have, depending on the demand and the scheduling. So there's a lot of work done there, but also on training and field management and check-in, check-outs and customer service and customer complaints. I mean, like, I recently looked at a removals company which had a 50%, I wouldn't say complaint rate, but 50% contact rate on top of the jobs, right? So at least half of the jobs get some kind of, there has to be somebody on the back end, and there was no way they could scale with that. And the same with a couple of contractual stuff. It's like, oh yeah, they're turning up on Thursday, this stuff here. And it was, I remember the first year, it was Google Docs. It was like, it was cloud based. So that meant, more people than one could work on it. But I remember those days, and it's like the reason we knew we had success was that the Google started to crash. Not Google, but the browser started to crash because there was too many bookings in one day. We used to have a week on the schedule, then we had one day on the schedule, then even one day couldn't do, then we had to split them up in services, and then it was like, okay, well, it's time to build a system, and that's where 14 years ago there was nothing on the market that does this. But I still don't think there's a couple of good things for contractual cleaning, but it's mainly based around one thing only. It's not about the booking, it's more about the lead management. And I was like, well, okay, that's okay, that's a great part of it, but you can actually automate more, right? So that you can actually let your client self-service themselves, and that's a huge benefit. Once they start, it's like, you've got a real estate agent, go click, 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 this is the pricing, and that just works in the system. That's a whole different ball game. It's like they self-service, and then you can offer competitive prices on that.
I think that definitely there's a big gap in that, because even for commercial cleaning businesses, generally you land on a website and it's call for a quote or call for an estimate. But if you can automate that process and get an answer there and then that just increases the stickiness, right, and the customer journey to using your service.
I'm okay
in saying that, is that something that you guys are?
We do that, but what we found out is that having the initial discussion, then once you got on, you land the contracts and so forth, it depends on how they're allocating their jobs, right? So if it's completely regular, if it's janitorial parts of it's completely regular, then it's just the system just runs it. I think the initial booking on that and the quotation for that needs to be done offline, or so to speak, on a call. But once it's running, then you just put the operations on. It's like, well, they just turn up there Tuesday at 8 a.m. every morning, and you check whether they've turned up, and this stuff here just comes up. You don't even look at it anymore in that way, and then it auto invoices. That's a whole different ball game for it. The quotation for certain jobs is not that easy to do. The larger jobs and quotation for those jobs is not that easy. It depends on the size of things and so forth. But the part of it afterwards is very important, to optimize and to schedule and making sure that the quality is there and everything else. But once you've got it, it's like, once you've got a customer on it, it's like, we've got customers who've got thousands of properties. They just click the button on this stuff here. And then, okay, well, once in a while, there's an account manager going in and saying like, okay, well, how was that? And how was this? But other than that, it's like they self-service in the sense of scheduling and so forth, because they can see the live availability of our guys.
And have you, other than using the system that you've developed internally, have you white labeled it to third-party companies as well? Is that something that you've explored and looking to expand? Because I guess,
the system left Fantastic Services a couple of years ago. So the system is available. It's serviceos.com, but it left Fantastic Services, and it's supplying plumbers and handymen, and it's supplying a lot of other companies globally. Actually, they're supplying that as a system. So the software is available, and it's not a shared experience in that way of it. It's just, we built the software for that reason. I mean, it runs a mobile spa, it runs a mobile couple of other things. Connection companies and so forth. I mean, it is a service operating system, and we build it there. It serves us. But then now it's got more features than we need on other services as well. So company stood on its own about 4 or 5 years ago. It stood on its own. It's just running.
That's good. Going back to the training that you offer your franchisees, you mentioned obviously sales, business development, and marketing. Which are the most successful avenues for for sort of marketing and sales that you have seen and experienced over the course of your, the 14 years? And which areas do you tend to focus on training the franchisees on?
Well, I write quite extensively about that in my book, and I'd say that it's one of the secrets as well. It's like it's something that you got to keep for your franchisees, right? So,
sure.
There are secrets.
But you can give us a little taste. It's all right.
What I found out, and what I always look at is like, and the reason Fantastic Services is so big is we looked at the idea of becoming a name in the industry, so that it was more search for that rather than say the specific service. It's like getting known for that. And I think that was what is the most successful part of it, because it's hard to build up a brand. I know there's a couple of really good commercial companies out in Wales and so forth that's done the same thing, and they've done incredibly well with that. It's they don't really chase for clients chase for them.
Yeah.
And that's it's rather to attract than to have to sit and knock on all the doors. So that's one of the things we said, is like attract clients rather than the other way around.
So more inbound rather than outbound.
Yes, inbound. Okay. It's like the conversion is up. They know your name, they know you're coming in. So it's a whole different ball game rather than going out and ringing doorbells with a piece of paper, or sending cold emails, or going through LinkedIn, or going through Facebook, or going through whatever it is. So being inbound is absolutely by far the most efficient.
And that's where your franchisees benefit, because as you say, you've built the brand, so immediately there's brand recognition. You've already got the search optimized as well. So the transition from searching for a particular service to landing on Fantastic Services to then filtering it down to the franchisee is very short, right?
Yeah.
Nice.
And that's where it goes straight in. I mean, like if I'm looking at it, if I was a blank canvas name company, you first have to go through, what are you? You first have to explain who you are, what your company does, and so forth. And that, that's taken away with being a brand. That helps a lot in the introduction of it. And says like, oh yeah, my auntie uses you, or whatever used you, and I saw your car this morning. It's a big difference from so forth, because then what you're negotiating is just a contract, which is okay, and there's a huge, it's a bigger business than the domestic business by far.
Yeah.
So by far this is a larger business. It's also something we're in now. It's something that we're doing more and more of in the commercial space. I would hate to saying this is exactly how it works. What I would say with marketing is that it's what works for you, and if something works really well for you, keep doubling it.
Yeah.
Don't necessarily try to venture on into all of them. We tried TikTok, we tried Facebook, we tried all sorts of stuff, and Instagram to attract. It's not there, right? There are some who can do it, some who can't, but then they don't have the scale and so forth. So, but that doesn't mean it doesn't work.
Yeah, I think it is worth testing different avenues to see, like you say, to see what does work. And clearly you found, online, in particular, web-based search is where you get the best results. I think also investing time in developing a brand is massively important, in particular in an industry like cleaning, because there are a lot of players, small players and big players, but because it is quite saturated, and a lot of the time there is a bit of a race to the bottom, because people compete on price rather than value. So really the importance of building a brand so that customers understand the value of your brand really then helps with your efforts to grow and to position yourself, so that you're not being compared on price. You're being compared on, okay, this is the value add that using this business, using Fantastic Services can add to me as an individual or as a business, because they solve A, B, and C problems.
That's why
but that doesn't come unless you've developed that brand, right? Because people won't know you otherwise.
That's why you see the lifetime of some corporates is like they're very old. They're very, very old. They've been around for 40, 50 years. They're very, very old. Some have been around for hundreds of years, right? The biggest ones have been around for 100 and something odd years. In fertility management, then it becomes a whole different kettle of fish. And it's very hard to punt a train on that, unless you go in, oh yeah, we can do it cheaper and this stuff here. And then once you're in that stuff, they don't survive very long. So it is, it's like, oh, they said, oh, they can do it for £8 an hour, so can I. It's like, can you? Have you got the software? Have you got everything else? It's like, you might win the contract, but are you going to be profitable on it? Are you going to be living off it? It's like, that's another story.
Yeah.
Right? That's the whole aspect of commercial and corporate cleaning that just becomes really tough to deliver, if you go down that race. So I agree with you.
In terms of the growth of Fantastic Services, like what's one decision that you took early on that the biggest impact on your growth?
Going online, opening up and answering the calls. I mean, that was the number one thing, like being open for the calls and so forth, inbound. That's the biggest.
Being visible. And as you've grown the business, like what's been one of the biggest challenges that you've had, and how have you overcome that?
Well, the biggest challenge was COVID.
Sure.
I mean, like COVID was a whole kettle of fish. I mean, I was in the steering group with the government trying to get them to do the guidelines on what is allowed, what is not allowed. I was in the steering group with the government in the early days of it, because people would be like, "Are you allowed to come with the plumber? Are you allowed to turn up? Are you?" It's like, can we get our handyman to come and fix this? And are they allowed? And so forth. And then getting tradespeople back in the game was a tough thing to get it rolling.
Yeah.
Because they shut down. It's not like other countries where they said, okay, well, tradespeople are allowed. And they said that very early on. The British government was very hesitant. So I spent a lot of time on that. I think it almost took us a month in total to get the guidelines amended and saying tradespeople are allowed to turn up, and if it's necessary, but it is necessary, and changing that. So that, I think, was the biggest challenge. Other than that, the challenges are always there. We launched a couple of services that didn't fit into our stuff. At one stage we launched a child service, like taking care of children. We launched that for about 6-7 months to try it out. That was a big challenge, something that we don't want to do again. Didn't really fit with the company. Everything was working, the tech was there, everything else was there, but it didn't really fit with the company and how we were doing certain things. So it's like, okay, that's a big challenge. So the challenges has also been about limiting us, about what we're going out to do next.
Yeah.
So Fantastic
Which
service.
lane to stay in, right?
Rather than do 55 different services. I mean, we even do massages and certain things for our partnership.
Oh, wow.
So it's been more about limiting some of the things that we're doing. I mean, we've had some fun things. We've done taking care of a pet snail in the office. Yeah, exactly. It's like it was
in the office mascot.
Yeah, exactly. It was a little mascot. There was a long story behind that, very cute story about it. That's kind of the things. It's like, oh, well, we can do everything. It's like, okay, well, you can't do everything for everybody at all the times. It's like sticking to what we're good at. So limiting that. At one stage, we're launching 20 services in 1 year, and they didn't take off the same way. It's going to come. But it wasn't the early immediate, bam, here we go. Here's another success. So I think that's been one of our things. It's like we can't do everything all the time. So that's been a challenge more on the ambition level.
Sure. But, property services and home services, that's certainly where the sweet spot is, right? You mentioned COVID. Understand that you launched Fantastic Academy during COVID. Is that right? To sort of train people and help people, get set up themselves?
Yeah. I mean, one of the things was that we knew that we had the strength to do this outside of London, where we were primarily focused, and now we're almost all over the UK. We're up in Scotland now. We're in everywhere else.
Nice.
We're in Australia. So we opened up for some of the values that we had and gave that a chance, during COVID, because so forth. But Scotland was shut down. You couldn't go to home cleaning. There was this, so many limitations.
Yeah.
So, but Fantastic Academy was part of our system already. We just opened it up.
Okay.
The same with a lot of other things. We opened up a lot of things in order to, like yourself, it's like to try and do something for the industry, because I think it's an interesting industry. It involves a lot of people. But also one of the things that my main thing has always been is their career path. I mean, one of the most beautiful things I've seen over the many, many years we've done this business is when somebody started as a cleaner and now owns 6-7 vans and is doing this. This is what part of our, the 1,000 million pound turnover businesses. And that's really been the driver for it. Is like, how can we give on what we've done? How can we bring them into that level?
Yeah.
And that's where the training comes in.
And you mentioned the 1,000 Millionaires. Was that something that has always been a driver, or was that something that has evolved as the business has grown and as you've seen, obviously, the opportunities that it's given people to start from, being a cleaner to open up their franchise to maybe, even owning multiple franchise businesses?
It was mainly meant as a motivation. In one thing is you really can go from not having a university degree. You really can go from that to making $1 million a year. You really can. And I've seen it. That was mainly to open up that door and say, like, listen, it's possible. It's possible to go from that, starting there, and then over a journey of a couple of years, do something that most people can't do in their lifetime of career of their job.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things that was mainly meant to open the door and say that's, it is possible. Not everybody's going to get it. It's not an easy journey. I can tell you that. The ones who've done it, like, okay, but it is possible, and it is possible to start from that and just go boop all the way. And I think the idea was that you're not stuck somewhere. It really is up to you to give it a chance. We've got a system, we've got training, we've got everything else. We've got every single building block there is for reaching that, taking on those things and, riding that wave of this stuff here. It really just says follow the system, follow this one here, follow the ways that it's done, but also break it in the sense of, you can buy 6 more teams, with this stuff here, and then you are growing faster. So that's kind of where we've seen some people taking really real success with it. Other people are like, well, I need to make an enormous amount of profit the first month I start. And it's like, it's not going to happen, right? It's like you're building this gradually. It's down to that, and it's like how and when do you get to that? The number of customers, the number of clients, the number of everything else you're investing in. At what stage do you take that off? Because it doesn't happen overnight. It's not a switch on, but it is very, very possible. We did it. So,
and if you have a framework in place like you guys are providing, then as much as you're not hand holding, but you're giving the steps to be able to follow to achieve that, right?
It's a lot of hand holding. I mean, it's a lot of hand holding. It's not push and pull, right? It is the help, and that's what franchising does, just like your training does, right? All the training that we do, we take them from day one until that level and beyond. Right. Sure. Some of them that are beyond that level now. So it is hand holding, it is training, it is the whole support, it is this stuff, and it doesn't always work, but it is possible. Yeah. I just want to open that door and say, like, listen, it's possible, and then allow people to take that journey.
Yeah, that's good. So look, Rune, I appreciate we've been on for just over half an hour. So just before we start wrapping up, I am curious to know what one lesson your fantastic journey has taught you that you think other cleaning business owners should learn?
It's not about cleaning, it's about your mindset. It's not about cleaning, it can be anything. Yeah. It's about mindset and nothing else. That's the one lesson I would like to say. It is your mindset that sets you up for what you're going to succeed. It's not whether it's cleaning, it can be handyman, it can be so forth. And don't be afraid of diversification, right? Of moving sideways instead of in one direction of it. If you've got good customers, keep them.
Yeah. Okay. I've got a couple of quick fire questions. What one piece of advice would you give to a younger version of yourself before you started your fantastic?
Well, trust yourself more. Yeah, that's a quick one. Trust yourself more. Yeah.
And what do you think are the 3 sort of non-negotiable skills that are essential to not necessarily starting a business, but to growing a business successfully?
Oof, that's a tough one because I'm going through ups and downs on it as well. The 3.
Well, what's been consistent throughout your?
You said the word. It's consistency. I mean, like, sure. You just have to keep going. Like, there's going to be tough times. Keep going. It's like when going through hell. I mean, like through COVID, and when we didn't know whether we were going to be alive or not, or whether anything was going to open again, whether we are going to have clients, whether they were going to all cancel and so forth. I just keep going. It's like whatever. We just shut our eyes and said, like, okay, what we're going to do and swift this stuff here. We talked to everybody. We listened a lot to our franchisees and said, like, well, hold on, this is booking, this is not booking, and it's like, okay, well, can we reskill? Yes, bam, move. So consistency and
mindset, building that mindset.
Yeah,
cool. Well, look, Rune, where can people find you online if they want to reach out and connect?
LinkedIn, Rune Sovndahl. Then, it's like Rune Entrepreneur on Instagram, and, in the Amazon book. Yeah. Stuff, fantastic business. The book,
pick it up.
Amazon bestseller when it was launched. It's both for franchising and running a scalable service business. It's not just a franchising book. It's not a franchising manual. It's meant to learn from franchising, as well as introduce franchising in a way of how we've done it. So it's start, scale, and succeed, learning from master franchising. I've got 12 principles in there in growth. It's quite an interesting one to go through for any service business and any industry in there as well.
Well, Rune, thank you very much for joining us on the Growth Lab podcast, and hopefully we get to speak again soon.
Yes, thank you so much, Matt.
Thanks to Rune for joining us on the Growth Lab podcast, and thanks to you guys for listening. You can access the show notes and resources via the link in the episode description, and if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with others who you think will find it useful across social media, or leave a rating and review on whatever podcast platform you listen to. You can also follow me on Twitter and Instagram I am _Matt Harris, that's MATTHARRIS, to catch all the latest from the Growth Lab and how to generate more contract opportunities for your cleaning business. See you next time. And remember, if your cleaning business isn't growing, it's dying.